Sharing the full and raw truth is hard, terrifying. It makes you feel vulnerable, a target for judgment. But at the same time, it's invigorating, liberating, while providing a foundation for healing and allowing someone to finally feel free.
When I was 10, I was in a sledding accident, which seems like a totally normal event happening, like people sled into like trees or like hurt themselves, like breaking an arm or something, sledding all the time. And it was kind of one of those freak accident things where you don't expect like the crazy worst thing to happen on a random day, but it does. And I was 10 years old and in the hospital with an obscene amount of internal injuries. And it's kind of surreal being a 10-year-old and wondering if you're gonna die or not, like, every day. And it's not like an instant thing where it's like I'm being held at gunpoint and I'm like either live or die. It's like a continual feeling of, is this the moment or is it not? And it's like sometimes you forget that it's kind of looming over you, but I could be in the middle of a conversation with somebody or doing the homework that I had to do in the hospital and all of a sudden to be like, am I ever gonna be normal again? Or is today gonna be the last day that I get to see my family or something like that? And over the years, it's gotten, I wouldn't say easier, but more normal, that feeling of, is today the day I'm gonna die? And it's not like a dramatic thing that I think people would hear this story and then kind of turn it into. It's more of a low press on your heart. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's kind of like embedded in you. And it's like, it used to be dread, but now it's not peace. It's just kind of there. And I think that's why it's hard to like be alone and not sink into like dark thoughts like that, because to me, being by myself physically is like the equation of like a death sentence, because even though I'm not in the hospital like right now or not continually in it anymore, there's still all of that physical damage that I can't pretend didn't happen. And for most people, they think like my biggest medical problems are like my voice being different or like hard to communicate with, or my breathing being a little bit more difficult to handle and inhibiting like normal functions. But for me, I feel like the worst part is not being able to express how that feeling of like, am I gonna die today? How it affects everything I do, because I still have scar tissue in my airway and I've had numerous surgeries to remove it, but it always grows back. And right now it's only 3/4 of the way covering my airway. Also, the fact that the word only is used in that situation means that I've kind of grown accustomed to not being able to breathe, but I know that at any point it could start growing again, and then I would just have no airway at all and just asphyxiate and die where I am, which is really heavy to talk about, but like, it's kind of my reality, you know, and I don't know how to talk about that in everyday life with people I care about, because how do you just bring something up like that? Like, what are people supposed to say to that? Like, how do they comfort you, you know? Because unless you can relate to that feeling, you don't know what to say. So I guess there comes a time when we need to figure out how to approach people about really heavy subjects without it being such like a big deal where you have to like sit down and talk about it. Like I wish I didn't feel scared to tell people that I have so much like heaviness weighing me down like this, like mentally and physically, because it's always such a big deal. And I don't want it to be a big deal. I just want it to be like addressed so I have some peace of mind. And so that I can just be like, okay, it's safe to bring this up if I'm having a bad day. But there's kind of a barrier there. And I know there's people who feel the same as I do because they have a disease that like inhibits their daily function, or they have some sort of injury that happened that they can relate to. And I know that I don't have it the worst, but sometimes when you look at somebody, you overestimate the privilege that they had in life. And I think that one of the biggest obstacles I've encountered during all of this stress is that you think people would be less ignorant or rude or anything involving a negative association with sticking your nose in somebody else's business. But I cannot tell you a single day I've gone where someone hadn't said something about my voice or asked me like what's wrong with me or made a joke at my expense. Like, those are the ones that hurt the most, when they make fun of me and they don't even know me. Random people, you know, cashiers, Uber drivers, someone who's selling me a bus ticket. Like, it's always something like that's condescending in a way, especially when they tell me that. Especially when it comes from older men, like who are approximately like 30 to 40 years old, and they tell me like, oh, it's okay, you have the ideal voice because now men don't have to listen to you yell and go on, or they don't have to listen to you talk. Like, you would make the ideal wife or girlfriend. And I'm like, fuck you. I don't want to be like this. And just because I'm like this sure as hell does not mean that I'm gonna be subservient. And it's just these little things that you wouldn't assume I go through, but it's just super shitty and it happens every day. So I feel like you can't assume everybody is okay just by looking them in the eye. There is so much internal damage like my body has undergone, and that in turn has affected like my mental capacity and emotional processing, and I feel kind of lost in this chaos that like people don't even seem to address, that not everybody is going to be understood as what's in front of them. That's why I never like comment or ask about anything that is apparently different about somebody, because like I know what it's like, and I wish that people didn't have to know everything about everybody that's like somewhat a curiosity. Like as soon as you meet them, like this is something that's like super personal to me. And while yes, it affects like my interaction with other people, I don't owe anybody anything to explain all of it to them. And yet here I am. So I don't know how to make all of this better. I'm not sure there's a way to make it better. You can't hope that everybody you meet is like fine and the same. Every person is different, has gone through different things, and may have more grief than you would think. So check up on those around you, because you never know what's lying beneath the surface.
Well, this past year has probably been the craziest year of my life. And it's what I went through was hard, but at the same time, I'm grateful that I went through it and that it happened to me when it did. So, this past spring, I had to bring my ex-boyfriend to Title IX and to the UPD at my campus because he was abusive and threatening to hurt himself because I didn't want to talk to him anymore because he kept dragging me along if it was a relationship or not. And there's just so many other minor, small details of abuse and just being nasty that I couldn't handle it anymore. And I'm not going into detail about that. What I really want to go into detail about is my story of mental health. So for as long as I can remember, I've always had this feeling of sadness or fear over minor things. Like I couldn't really talk to people that I didn't know well. It took me a long time to actually like be able to talk to someone in a restaurant, like to order food. It made me so nervous to do that. Or maybe I didn't want to ask someone for directions because I just didn't want to talk to them because it made me so anxious to talk to a person. And then I'd also have these moments of just such deep sadness and depression where I would be in my bed at night bawling my eyes out and I had no idea why, and I didn't want to be on the earth anymore, and I didn't want to feel this anymore, and I just had this overwhelming feeling of just I wanted to hurt either myself or someone else. I just always had this feeling whenever I got really like overwhelmed or super angry or really anxious or really depressed that I just wanted to feel pain, physical pain, not mental or like emotional pain, but like physical pain. And having to go to UPD and go to Title IX forced me to go to counseling. And it was probably the best decision of my life that I went along with it. And I did go to counseling and I got to talk to someone and I got to finally understand the thoughts in my head and why I feel this way sometimes, and that I don't have to feel that way, and that I'm not crazy. It's just my brain doesn't function the way it's supposed to, which is fine. Millions of people suffer with it every day. And I don't like to say the word suffer because it's not something you should suffer, it's something you should understand. And that's where I've gotten to now in my life, is that I'm starting to understand my mental health. I am starting to take medications. I go to counseling regularly or every few weeks, and it just feels great to finally understand myself and to know that no, I'm not crazy. There is words to it, and that I'm not alone, And there's the thing, so many people say that people romanticize mental health and that not everyone is fucked up in the head or whatever, but I don't think that's true. I think the people that reach out and people who say something are the ones that do have it. Or they're ones that like slyly mention it or something. I feel like in this world now people are starting to be more accepting and understanding towards those who do have mental health issues or those who do struggle with having these kind of thoughts in their head and not understanding why their brains just don't want to work with them and why people just think differently. And I don't mean think differently as in like, oh, different political views, but I mean like body dysmorphia. So many people can look in the mirror and just see themselves as enormous when they're like not even that big, and it's just crazy that your brain could do that to you. And I wish more people would be more understanding that we don't really understand the brain that much. As much as science is like want to say like, oh, we understand the brain in this way and that way, it's like we don't though, because every day people are surfacing and their brain just works differently and they just think differently or they see themselves differently. Like the levels of anxiety and how people feel that anxiety is just crazy, and it's like not every person's the same, so obviously we can't know the brain. I don't know. There's a lot to say about it. And I guess I just want people to know that no, you're not alone out there. There are millions of others who know exactly what you're going through, how you're feeling. Your family may not understand, but there's someone out there who does. And even if you just reach out for a day to talk to someone, that's better than doing nothing. I guess I really want to say is that I'm glad I got the help when I did, and I want to be someone who advocates for others to get their help, and I want to be someone who, you know, can look at a person and understand them and let them know that they're not alone. And I guess that's really why I wanted to become a teacher and why I am studying to be a teacher, is because I always felt my teachers knew me better than my own family. And I think teachers have such an important role to play, especially when it comes to mental health in young children. And I'm just so excited and happy that I finally found myself in a place where I'm getting better, I can help others get better, and I know in the future I'll be able to reach out to others as well.
So, something I think about a lot is death. It's not like I think about it 24/7 or anything, but I think about it a lot if I'm driving. It's really weird because I've like when I was little, I've been in car accidents and stuff, and I definitely get like panic attacks with it. But like it's on YouTube, they have these car crash videos, and I watch them. I don't know why I watch them, but I do. But when I'm driving, I definitely think about it, and like I could be on the highway and like I'll see cars and I'll think, oh, what if that car just like comes up on the right and flips over onto my car or a car in front of me? Or I think like if someone's texting, like they just swerve out of nowhere and then they cause an accident. But I always think about it, like I always just think about dying or like death when I'm driving. And I definitely think about it, like if it's raining, I think about hydroplaning or flipping the car over. Flipping the car over is probably like my biggest fear, or a car flipping onto me, but it's never happened obviously, but I always think about that. I don't know what I do, it's crazy to me, but yeah.
So right before my grandpa died, he had to have surgery because in '96, I was like 3 months old. He had to have open heart surgery, and whenever you do open heart surgery, they basically have to cut you, down your chest. But a lot of people don't know that they have to actually saw your ribs and pull out your sternum, which is the part that protects your heart. And then when they put everything back together, they use this type of wire. I mean, and then in '96, that's how they did it. At least they might have changed it now, but they have a metal wire. And right before my grandpa died, he was, he was always a skinny guy, like very thin. I think his max weight when he was like in his 20s was like 105. And he got so thin because he was so sick and not eating that some of the metal wire actually started to poke through his skin, and they didn't want it getting infected. So he had to go under anesthesia, and they had to remove the wiring. And then he just never really recovered from that. But right before he died, they were making dinner, and they couldn't get it out because my grandmother was in a wheelchair. She had just fractured her spine. And they called the house to see if anybody could go over and take the dinner out. So I went over and I took it out. And then the next day he was dead. So anyway, after my grandpa died, it was just my granny. It was just her, alone in the house. I mean, she'd never been alone for 60 years. They were together for 65 years, almost 70 years actually. She'd never been alone. So I was kind of like, what do we do? And it took a while to get into the pace of things, but then it kind of just became like we got into a routine. My dad would go over and feed her breakfast, and then he would come back from work and give her eye drops and her medication. And then it would be, if she had to go to the dentist or go to the doctor or get out of the house, it would be me or my brother and my dad. And we would go and we would get her down the stairs in the wheelchair. And it was things that at the time was kind of like, this is like such a pain in the ass. Like it sucked, honestly. Like it wasn't fun going over there to help her. But after a while, it just became kind of like, okay, that's what I'm doing today. In the beginning, it was just, it was hard because it was like, I have so much I want to do. And I have to basically put my life on hold so that I can go over there when she needs tea or anything else. And it became that way to a point where she would call me all the time. I mean, like, I would get 40 calls a day. And you know what? Honestly, looking back, I laugh because it was some of the funniest things that she would call for. She would call for, she called me about a squirrel being in her yard. I mean, I remember the one time she called me, actually in the middle of math class. My third time taking this math class because I failed it 2 other times. For absences, and I missed tests because the people needed to be home with her. So it was my third time taking this course, and my dad was pissed. He was like, if you don't pass this one, you're paying for the rest of college yourself. And I was like, all right, then I'll pass this one. And she called me in the middle of the first day. And she called me, and I answered the phone, and I said, yeah, what's up, Granny? And I didn't even leave class. I was just still in class. I was like, fuck it. If you have a problem with me answering this phone call, I'm going to leave anyway. But I need to, I'm answering them. I'm not making her wait. So if I didn't answer the phone within 3 rings, she would hang up and then call again because she knew I would answer the second I saw it. Or she would leave a voicemail. If it was like in a dire emergency, she would leave a voicemail. But yeah, she called me, and I thought that she overdosed on her prescriptions because she called me and all I heard was, Sean, there's a really fat squirrel sunbathing in my yard. And I was like, what the fuck? What is she taking? I'm like, did she accidentally take her Percocet instead of like her multivitamin or something? Like, why is she hallucinating like that? What the hell's going on? So by the 3rd phone call, I finally was just like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm leaving the class. She obviously wants me home to look at something, so I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna tell the teacher I'm sick. I gotta take a shit. I gotta do something, but I'm gonna leave. So I just told the professor, I was like, hey, look, I gotta go. I got an emergency with my grandma, and he was like, okay, go ahead. So I went home and I went to her house, and she goes, I'm glad you're here, but the fat squirrel is gone. And I was like, what? All right. Okay, yeah, the fat squirrel is gone. Okay, do you want me to make you tea? Do you want cookies? Like, do you want me to do something else? Like, do you need icy hot on your shoulders? Like, do you need your feet up? Do you need anything while I'm here? And so she, I just did the normal stuff. I got her cookies and tea, and I got her puzzles, and I got everything she wanted. And then I went home, and then 2 days later, going up her stairs, in her ivy, what do you see? A fucking gopher. Laying on its back and dancing in the weeds. Like, I'm not even kidding. Just laying on its back and, like, sunbathing. And it looked like a fat squirrel. I thought she was making it up. I couldn't even tell my dad. Because if I told my dad that there actually was a fat squirrel dancing on Granny's lawn, he would think I was taking her meds. So, yeah, she used to call that everything. She would call me, I remember one time she called me at midnight to come over because she wanted me to see how fat the girl on Wheel of Fortune was. At midnight. She was up at midnight watching Wheel of Fortune, and I was sound asleep, and she called me and said, Sean, are you busy? And I was just, me being sarcastic, no, okay, and I was just sleeping. She goes, okay, good. Can you come over real quick? I want you to see how fat this girl is. I'm like, okay. I went over. My dad was just going up to bed. He goes, where are you going? I got Granny called. Well, what does she need? Is something wrong? I said, no, she just wants me to go look at the TV. And he was like, oh, God, all right.
So I was accepted to Binghamton as a spring admit, but during senior prom, I got a phone call from Binghamton, and the woman told me, like, oh yeah, you've been moved off from the wait list, congratulations. Like a week after getting that great news, I received like the worst news of my life. My mom wasn't feeling good. She had like stomach pains. We took her to the hospital and she got checkups, and the doctor said, yeah, it's cancer and it's really bad. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and it was like stage 3 or 4. They didn't really give us the number. During the summer, she wasn't that bad. Like, she went to doctors and x-rays and appointments. You know, she helped me get ready for college. She had like the checklist of things I had to get still, you know. And she was there with me during move-in day. She helped me, you know, bring all my stuff to my room. And then, you know, she said goodbye. I never really talked about my mom being sick to people because it's hard to talk about. Like, if I even like mentioned it a little bit, I would get emotional, and I just don't like crying in front of people, so I don't talk about it. And I know there's so many, like, I have so many great friends and family who are there for me. Binghamton has a lot of breaks, so I was able to see her a lot during those breaks, even if they were just, you know, a few days. After, like, Christmas break, you know, she started to get worse. Like, she wasn't able to eat, like, certain foods started to not taste good to her, which was making it hard having meals and trying to get her to eat, like, at least something. The last day of my Christmas break, I, you know, gave her a hug and kiss. She said, bye, I love you, you know, do well in school. And then I left. Between Christmas break and my next break, which was spring break, it was a pretty big gap. Like, it was a month and a half, maybe 2 weeks before my spring break. I was at work, and then after work I was on the bus, and like I was checking my phone, and my mom sent me like a long text about how the doctor said that the chemotherapies haven't been doing anything, and her cancer it grew, and it was just getting worse. And when I read that message, I was obviously heartbroken. I was happy that my break was coming up soon, so I was able to see her. One day she was not like fine, but she was talking, you know. She was functioning normally. And then just overnight, her body just like, it began to shut down because she wasn't eating properly. And then like the next day, she wasn't talking. She wasn't communicating in any way. Like, she was barely conscious. Her eyes were open sometimes, but like there was no way that people could really communicate to her. Yeah, but like maybe Sunday she was totally okay, and then Monday, that was when just like everything just shut down. And then Thursday was the day that I came home for spring break because there was a huge snowstorm. So Friday classes were canceled, and I remember going on a bus, and it was packed, and I was on like in the very back next to the bathrooms, which was gross. I got a call from my dad, and I was gonna go to the hospital right after getting off that bus. And my dad called me, like, telling me, like, how bad she got. She's probably gonna have to go to hospice or something. But after getting that phone call, I was bawling my eyes out. The two people next to me were looking at me like I was crazy or whatever, but I didn't care. I ended up missing my bus stop, which made me even more upset, but thankfully my mom's friend drove me to the hospital. I walked into the room and she was like not herself at all. Her eyes were open, like that was the last night her eyes were open. We were just in the hospital room and I didn't know what to do. I was like really upset seeing her the way she was, but I just held her hand because I didn't know what else to do, you know. And then we left, and then there was like a huge snowstorm the next day, so we couldn't visit her, but my sister went to go visit her. The next day after that, once the roads were plowed, my sister, my dad, and I all went to visit her. And that was like the first time that the family was, you know, all together in the hospital. I played her a video that, like a tribute kind of video to her, for her, that I made, and I just played it in her ear because, like, I didn't know if she was able to hear or, like, what was going on. The next day, we were gonna visit in, like, the afternoon after eating lunch, and my dad went to church, and then my sister and I were in the living room watching TV, and then we saw, like, the call ID. It was the hospital, and they called. So my sister picked up the phone, and the woman's like, "Oh, is your dad here?" And my sister said no, so she's like, "Okay, tell your dad to call back when he's home." And then my dad got home from church, and he said that he got a phone call from the hospital. And he said, like, she passed away. A lot of friends and neighbors and people from church were really nice, and they brought, like, food to our house when they found out what happened. A lot of people were asking about, like, when the funeral or memorial was, but, like, we didn't really want to think about it considering she, like, just passed away a few hours ago. We planned a memorial for her. It was, like, 2 weeks after, and then I spoke during the memorial. It was really hard delivering it, but I finished it. I went back to school, and there's always things, and, you know, like movies, there's things I see in the store, and it makes me think of her, and I'm just like, oh, I wish I could show her this or buy her this. It makes me sad thinking that she's not gonna be here, you know, when I graduate, when I get married and have kids one day. When she was sick, she would talk about, like, oh, you know, if I die, like, and when she's talked about that, I didn't want to think about it. I'm adopted, so my parents are a lot older than me. Like, I knew that they weren't going to be in my life as long as other people's parents because they're a lot younger. Like, I have friends that have grandparents and great-grandparents still, but I didn't expect my mom to be gone when I was, you know, 18. It makes me upset when I feel bad because I know there are people who have lost their mom or, like, a parent at, like, such a younger age. There's people who don't even know what it's like to have parents, and I don't want to seem, like, ungrateful, but, like, I don't think we should be comparing griefs. You know, like, people always being like, yeah, there's kids in Africa starving, but, like, that's not a way to help someone when they're going through things, you know? After, like, my mom died, I went to my first Relay for Life. This girl talked about losing her mom to cancer at, like, 7 years old. My mom was there for me when I, you know, graduated 8th grade, when I graduated high school. She sent me off to college. She was there for me to help me pick out my prom dress. But then there's, like, other people who, like, their mom was taken away from them at such a young age. Like, I definitely relied on my mom. I'm the totally opposite of her. Like, she's very talkative and social. She stands up for herself. she doesn't care what people think of her, you know. And like I never stand up for myself, and like I hate, you know, confrontations with people. I feel like it's easier just ignoring them. And there's times when people are rude to me, and I'm always like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, if my mom was here, she'd be going off on them, or like she wouldn't allow someone to talk to her like that or talk to me like that. She talked to like everybody. She talked to strangers, and she even made like she became friends with those strangers, and she talked to people equally. Like she didn't talk or try to become friends with you because of popularity or status. Like she genuinely liked having conversations with people, which is honestly rare in this day. I honestly feel I regret a lot. Like sometimes I wish that I went to more doctor's appointments with her. I wish I visited her a week earlier, because then I would have been able to talk to her before she wasn't able to talk. And then sometimes I regret like coming to Binghamton, because I was here while I could have been home with my mom for the last few months that she was going to be alive. It went from this might be her last summer, go on a nice vacation. And then it went from, yeah, she might have maybe a few months to weeks. And then it went to days. Like, yeah, she has a few days left. Like at the time, it's just getting smaller and smaller. I know she wouldn't want me to feel guilty of this, like going to school. Like she wanted me to go to school, and she was so happy that I was going to school and doing well. When I went to the hospital to visit her, one of the nurses like, oh yeah, are you the daughter that goes to Binghamton? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, your mom has said so much about you, and she's talked so much about you and how proud she is. Like she definitely does not want us to be like dwell on her and like stop our lives because of her death. Like she wants us to continue our lives and be happy. When I die, I don't want people to hold back because they're upset about me or they feel guilty that I'm not there or something like that. Like when I die, I want them to, you know, remember me but continue their lives without being sad. Like I want them to be happy. So I know she probably feels the same thing. It's I don't know, I guess it's been almost 8 months, and this is gonna be the first Christmas that we celebrate without her, which is, it's hard, you know. Don't take people in your life for granted. Like tomorrow is not guaranteed, and they could be taken away from you at any moment or like second. I'm not saying go up to people and force them to tell them their personal story or something like that. But if they want to talk to you, you should be there for them and listen and like help them feel heard. When they're telling you stuff, don't try to think about what you're gonna say or like give some cliche quote to them. Just be there for them and be kind to people. It doesn't take much to be a decent person. You don't know what someone's going through, and being an asshole it just like makes everything worse. I have text messages and Facebook posts that I always look at of my mom's, and I even have like a video of her voice, which helps me remember her. I find a lot of peace in knowing that one day we will be reunited, and there will be a time where my whole family, you know, and everyone I love and everyone I have lost will one day be together again.
I'm done.
Okay,
I was just rambling. I don't even know if half of it makes sense.
that's
but-
fine.
Brittany,
Again?
that was very all over the place, but it's fine.
My eyes are pretty.
Yes, they are.
Britt, I'm done.